Hi, Ron. Thank you very much for coming today.
Hi, Natsne.
So today I wanted to start this interview by asking you what your current job is, and then what have you done in your life and everything, just to give people context of who you are, because I know you're like amazing, super
Oh,
smart,
thanks.
brilliant person.
So I'm an advisor for startups, and I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I
Mhm.
have also been an investor.
Mhm.
All this has happened to me in the last 6 years. It's been a really exciting time of life for me,
Mhm.
and it's been an amazing experience because I've had the good fortune to work with 100 startup teams.
Mhm.
The market cap, the value of the companies I've worked with, total, all bundled
Mhm.
together, is over $3 billion. And, um,
Wow.
and we helped start the team that I was working with. We co-founded an accelerator called IndieBio in San
Mhm.
Francisco, which takes biotech companies and makes
Mhm.
startups, really small companies, and it helps get them started. And now
Mhm.
it's kind of a global phenomenon. There's hundreds of companies like that. And in particular, when it comes to food, that's like one of the hottest places for biotech right now. There's well over 100 biotech food companies,
Mhm.
and they're terribly exciting. And it's one of the things that really keeps me going in my life. I'm really enjoying
Mhm.
it.
Very nice. This is just out of my curiosity. Like, what kind of is it a program? Like, it's an accelerator program, right? Like, what kind of
Mhm.
support do you provide for
Well,
startups?
I don't work in IndieBio anymore, but IndieBio is still
Mm-hmm.
going. It is an accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
There are thousands of accelerators. I think there's about 1,000 accelerator programs on the planet, but IndieBio is a special one where an accelerator is where you come into the program and you have a limited amount of time. And so over the few months that IndieBio program runs,
Mm-hmm.
you learn really fast, and you try to get your company up to the point where it can be it's investment worthy. And so over
Mm-hmm.
4 months, it's very intense. You
Mm-hmm.
change a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a demo day at the end, which you can actually find on YouTube. There's demo days where the entrepreneurs stand up and they talk about the company for 5 or 6 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And about 70% of them have had funding, at least when we were there.
Wow.
So it's an amazing scene. And it's just getting started. And McKinsey
Mm-hmm.
just published a report that basically said biotech is basically going to be the 21st century economically, because it has a chance to make almost any product that we use sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to give it up. We don't have to live in the Stone Age just to be
Mm-hmm.
sustainable on the planet. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very exciting time for biotech. And it's really made my life exciting.
Mm-hmm. So, because a lot of people who watch this is also entrepreneur, I'm curious, like, is there, um, like when you're accepting startups, like what kind of, I guess, qualifications do you look for in terms of characteristic of
Yeah.
the person or like team members? Like, what kind of things do you look for?
Well, there's a couple different answers to that question. One of them is as an advisor and someone who just works with startups. Sometimes I'll take a team that's very early on. They're not really ready for investment, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll work with them until they are ready for investment. And
Mm-hmm.
IndieBio and Y Combinator and Beyond Next Ventures and other kinds of accelerators like that, they will do very similar things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when you're not ready for an accelerator like IndieBio or Y Combinator, one of those,
Mm-hmm.
you probably need to find an individual to help you with your team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when you are an investor looking for a team, what you're looking for, actually, I say you want three things. You want a good pitch, you want a good team, and you want a good plan.
Mm-hmm.
So the most important is the plan. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the company, what the company's about, what does it do, how does it create value, and how does it help people, how does it
Mm-hmm.
make impact? All of those things are are what the investor's really looking for. But
Mm-hmm.
when you present yourself, like in the pitch, and when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about the people you've worked for you also say whether you're the right person to do that mission. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really important because the people who actually perform the task of turning this company into a real endeavor, those have to be perfect. They have to be strong enough to actually get it done. If they're not
Mm-hmm.
involved, if they're not interested, if they're not skilled, if they're not determined, if they're not hardworking, then no matter how brilliant the plan is, nothing will come of it. So we need all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important to start with a good plan and find a good plan, and then try to make your team strong enough to actually get the plan done.
Interesting. So I'm going to move on to our next question, which is actually, once again, it's related to entrepreneurship and also the fact that you work in an environment where you meet a lot of creative ideas and innovation, like it's happening on a daily basis, right? Like, what about working in that environment excites you?
There is nothing that makes me feel more alive than working with small teams. And just when you have your own startup, if you've got the right people running it, the right startup, there's a feeling that almost anything can happen, that the world can really change. And that's a tremendous amount of feeling that just really gets you going, gives you a tremendous amount of energy. And it really, it lets you believe in what you're doing. I think I've had several jobs over my career, and I did well and I earned good money and all this, but you know, whenever I wouldn't really believe in what I was doing, I just had to get out of there.
Right.
And so it's especially important to me. I think the Bay Area is still one of those places where it's easy to meet people who love that feeling. But I think that anywhere, you know, if you're in Tokyo, if you're Shanghai, you're in Singapore, you're in Israel, you're in Europe, some European city like London, if you are surrounded with the right people, if you've got that environment that makes you feel alive and you feel that you're full of potential, you know, I think that that's a good place to be. That's the right place to be.
But it's kind of hard to keep that mindset up, right? Like, there will be, especially when you're in a startup environment, like your business is not established yet. So there must be many obstacles, many triggers that could turn someone into negative state, right? Like, do you still see that still happening? Or
it's incredibly difficult. I mean, you can't just sort of like wave your hands in the air and make $100 million or $1 billion company. You know, it's still a tremendous amount of work, and there's a tremendous number of things that can and will go wrong. I think it's really about getting in the right mind frame that this is making you feel alive. You know, if it makes you feel alive to handle difficult problems and to learn and to change how to solve those problems, that's what makes it a thrilling place to be. You know, I think the feeling that you're steering your own ship is one of the most exciting things that you can do in your life. And it may not be something you want to experience at any given moment in your life, but sometimes in your life, I think it's worth having it, you know? It's a good experience I've had at some point.
But was this something you developed over time by, you know, being able to work in this environment, or like when did you acquire this thinking?
That's a good question. I think I always loved adventure, and I've always loved the idea of being creative. For a long time, I gotta say, I didn't really have any tools to be creative. I didn't really have the ability to actually put things together to make them work. And there was a point where I really wanted to break out on my own, but I really just didn't know what to do. I've always had that desire, but it was after I got my PhD and after I started doing working in industry for a while, I finally felt like I just had to do it, and I finally had the ability to sort of have the tools to make it work. And so you don't know it's hard to say when this is going to happen to anybody, but if you feel like you have that, if you have that in your heart, that you know you want to get out there and you want to see how you can do on your own, then you should always be learning something new and getting ready for it. So I was always packing my bag and putting my tools together, and I'm so happy it happened. You know,
who was like the most, I guess, trained, like a mentally trained entrepreneur you've ever met? Like someone you thought, wow, like this person is very strong.
You know, I can't really name a single one. There are, I mean, I've been lucky enough to surround myself with so many just amazing people. That's that I can learn from. And I'm constantly learning something new every day. And there are, if you put yourself in the right place to meet these people, like for instance, like I was just speaking with Paul Shapiro, who is an entrepreneur in Sacramento, not far from here. We were talking about how he built his company and what's going on in the world. And I just, like, he was very highly placed in the Humane Society. He's learned how to run large organizations. He's met hundreds, he's got hundreds of friendly contacts in his network that helped him build his business and create something really unique. You know, I think that, you know, that was a recent encounter I had. You know, Paul is the kind of guy who he puts his hands on something and he starts putting it together and it starts to work, you know, as an organization, as a culture, as a community. You know, I'm working with 3 or 4 entrepreneurs right now who I really think they're building factories and plants and labs, and they've all got tremendous amount of skill in what they do. They always need help with something, and they know how to reach out for it. But you know, and I saw Mark Andreessen talk recently. You know, there's a guy who's seen hundreds of companies come together, and so all these people, once you get to know them, they have hundreds of stories, and there's almost a story for every occasion after a while. And it's really inspiring because you just feel like, oh, there's a tremendous amount of power in sort of like drawing your experience and saying, this is the problem, let's solve the problem. It's a great place to be. But I mean, they're out there. They're out there. Almost everybody in every city, you can reach out to people like that, and you can learn from them.
I think I framed my question slightly wrong way. I guess my question was, what is that makes someone great at entrepreneurship? Let's say entrepreneurship.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you one thing. Let me sort of like tilt that off, because I don't think there are not too many things in common except for a love for what you do. I think what's really interesting about doing business is that it's like throwing yourself in the jungle, and there's all these different animals and they all do different things. And just sort of seeing all these things work, you realize that there is no single mindset that works. There are people who appear utterly flaky. I'm serious. Like, you just like, these people cannot remember to show up on time to an appointment, right? There are other people who are just so introverted that they cannot give a talk, but they just love to work. They just love to work on what they work on. All of these people, I have seen so many different kinds of people succeed. You don't have to become one particular kind of mega entrepreneur. We don't have to become, you know, Elon Musk to succeed. We can all learn to succeed from where we are. I think that's what's really amazing. I have stopped judging people so much more. You know, like when I was sitting at my desk and I got my paycheck and nothing really mattered to me, I could judge people and I'd say like, oh, that person's flaky, or that person's incompetent, or that person's not very bright. I could say that, but now I've seen all these kind of people succeed and manage things in their own way. And yeah, I think anybody could theoretically do it. I would certainly myself never say no, that this person's not going to make it. If they really want to, you know, they can find a way.
So when you said that you still kind of value a team, right? Like when you're accepting new startups, like that was the second priority you mentioned earlier. When you say you are judging the business by the team, does that mean that if they love the mission, like, is that what your indication?
That's true. You know, if you have a group of people and they're all ready to go and they're super excited, that's very useful. But there's another thing too. You know, most of these ideas start with one person. But what we find is what's really well known in startups is that if you're a sole founder, there's a much higher chance you're going to fail. It's like 30% higher chance that you'll fail if you don't have a co-founder. And so another thing a team tells you is that this person managed to talk somebody else into going into this with them, dropping everything in their life and joining them. That means that they can sell their idea. If you sold it to some random person to become your co-founder, that's fantastic. If that person is amazing and that they have a lot going on and they still joined, that's even better. So it's a sign that you have some of the skills necessary to make the startup into a company. To me. Yeah.
I see.
Your first, I say the co-founder is your first sale. If you can't sell to somebody to join you, who's going to buy?
Wow, that's interesting. I never looked at it like that. Like, that's really insightful. So I'm gonna move on to my next question, which is, this is gonna be juicy question, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote down, what does it mean to be an authentically confident person in the environment of capitalism? And I want to give you a little bit more of a context of where I come from with this question. In business, there's a fear of being wrong, or there's a fear of being incorrect person, because the more you know, the more authoritative you look to customer or whoever, like the more resource you can attract, the more, right? And this is why sometimes I think people could find it a little bit difficult to present themselves authentically, but then still balance that with the fact that they're a confident person. Because sometimes, you know, you could feel this pressure of like you having to be the one who knows everything, and
Right.
you know, you are the expert, right? Like, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, a friend of mine say that business entrepreneurialism is a spiritual quest. And I think that there's a great element to that, is that if you're gonna start with no experience and build a business that's going to impact people's lives and change things, you're gonna not be the same person as when you started, right? And part of that journey is to overcome your own apprehensions about yourself. So you're always, you want to be, people struggle with being authentic because they think, if I talk and I sound like I think I'm smart, then I'm not being authentic. And so a lot of people, especially when they get started, but we all struggle with it. Every level you go, you still struggle. How do I do this and still hold on to my soul, right? How do I be myself, but yet be this person who stands up, speaks with authority, maybe makes people feel not as smart as they feel normally, or maybe just it seems proud, or how do I become that kind of person, but still be the humble self I started with? And I spend a lot of time when I coach, I spend a lot of time talking about that adjustment with people, because some people think like they can avoid it. For instance, the first thing to do is to sort of say, well, this idea is so brilliant. If I just say this idea happened, then people will just come to me and they'll do everything I want. But that actually isn't true. People will follow an idea if somebody is presenting it. Like, for instance, Life Up is your idea, and you're making this happen. You can't just put up a sign saying Life Up is about inspiring people to follow their dreams. You kind of have to be that person. You kind of have to be following your dreams, and you have to sort of be an example of what Life Up's about, right? So you have to have a person. One of the founders, at least one of the founders, is going to have to be the personification of the idea. And so it's not a humble moment to stand up in front of 500 people and say, this company is going to change the world, and life is never going to be the same because we're doing this. And if you don't say it, it's really never going to happen. And so we have to spend time thinking about how can you be the authentic person up there saying that? And so what I have figured out is that a lot of it is about creating a new understanding of your motives. You purify your motives, and then you turn around and then you give the talk. So a lot of people rush in and say like, okay, I have to do this. I'm the boss. I'm super smart. Here I am. I'm giving the talk. And it doesn't quite turn out right. Or maybe you kind of get a little more awful when you do that. So a better way to do it is say, look, if you don't do Life Up, who's going to do Life Up right? Who's going to do it the way you think it should be done? And you think it should be done because it is better this way. People need to be treated a certain way. They need to be talked to a certain way. And if you don't do it, Natsune doesn't do it, then no one will do it. So that's why you're going to do it. And see, and so then you have to say it, because the idea will never go anywhere without it. And so we do this for the idea. We do this for the people that we are serving. We don't do it for ourselves. And so I go through a series of exercises like this, and then people start talking louder and louder and louder. But they do it with confidence, and they come across as being real, interesting people, not not just like, you know,
Sorry.
not awful people.
I'm sorry. I was trying to send a stamp. Yes. No. Yeah.
And there's another thing too, is that people will still say awful things about you. When you have a lot of attention and followers, people will say awful things about you. And you need to be able to say, you know what? Even if someone says this about me, it doesn't matter because I'm doing something important and I have to do it. And so these are the kind of things that help people keep moving and growing while they get into these very, very strange places.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think a lot of times when we can switch that, if we can switch our perception about being challenged is something positive, then it could come out as a lot of self-doubts. Like it could come out as a trigger for a lot of self-doubts. So right. I very much like what you said about, you know, how you need to change your perception as a leader to look at the challenges that you're going to be tested, right? Like you would become stronger
right.
in the way you want to be stronger.
I like what you said there, because if you do say something and you have a self-doubt and it shows, what's going to happen? It's going to all fall apart. It's going to be a disaster. And so you have to put yourself in a mindset where what you're doing is right. And it's something you believe in. When you really believe in it, then self-doubt doesn't show anymore because you don't have it. But other people, they just try to do it and they suppress a self-doubt and it just spurts out. It just like comes out sometimes. It's really bad.
Okay, so the final question is, so I know that you had established very successful career, both in corporate field and also startup environment. Like, I think this is possibly the most courageous thing someone can do is that when you're established, like when you hold position that you were established and then you decide to do something else, just completely like, you know, going to a different direction and like be willing to start over again from nothing. Like that's super courageous, right? Like there must be fear. Like no matter how successful you are, there must be fear. How did that happen, and how did you gain the courage to make that decision?
You know, that's a really, you know, it's interesting because this is kind of like an example of the last question. Like I have to say, it built up slowly. You know, I had a good job, like you say, and I was making really good money, I thought, and I was very stable. And actually, I have to say, I was so good at my job, it took very little work to do it. So, but you know, when I wasn't as fully focused on my work and believing in my work because I didn't have to do my job, I became sadder and sadder. I was more and more feeling that I had to do something else. And that's a very important sign. You know, I know that I'm always reading the news. I'm reading about startups. I'm reading about biotech and how synthetic biology is this new idea. This is a few years ago, and that it really has this amazing potential. And I really felt it. And, you know, and I kind of went home and told my wife, like, I have to try something. And she said, okay, go ahead. And so I started building a company in the evenings and the weekends. And I did 3 startups, I think, for over 3 years.
Wow.
And it was great. I learned a lot. And I just said, this is something I have to do. For me, I was really lined up. I just couldn't see myself staying in that job, almost no matter how much it paid. And I just, when you know it, then it was very authentic. It was very easy for me to do it. Sometimes I make more money than that. Sometimes I make less money than the job I left. But I never think about it. I never think about, oh, I wish I had what I had. You know, I'm totally interested in what I'm doing. I completely think it's worthwhile. And I never even think about what it would be like if I didn't do it. So I think if you're ready and you tell yourself you're ready and you work hard to get ready, if it's something you have to do, then it's not a problem, you know, at some point. And then what's happened now is I'm much quicker to jump to change. You know, I left my job as investor. I left my startup to start something else. Like when it's time, I just go. And so I think that was my growth lesson. It's really what I learned to do is sort of say, you know what, it's time for me to do this. And I just go do it. And I don't worry about, well, what happened if I didn't do it? And I think that makes me very strange and unusual. You know, I don't know how, I really can't explain it, but you know, I don't try to make people into that. I think if you are the kind of person who feels you have to do this, then I love to work with you, you know? But I don't try to convince people that it's time. You know, there's a lot of people on TikTok and Instagram give all kinds of advice and they're like, get up and build something today, you know, find out something you want to be passionate about. Like, well, hey, maybe you don't have anything.
Right.
Oh, that's okay, you know, but I can't give you any good advice because you're going to hate it. So
yeah.
I live in a different place than Gary Vee. I don't have to tell, I'm not trying to get anybody to get out of bed and do anything. If you're out of bed and you want to do something, you know, call me. But I don't believe everybody, I don't even know if everybody should do it. And that's okay.
Yeah, I totally understand. Like there's something, did I tell you that I wrote a book? I forgot if I told you.
I saw that you wrote a book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a book. And one part I talk about this concept from Adam Smith, the father of economics. And then he talked about invisible hand. But he talks about it from the context of economy, and where he says when economy is at optimal, when there's no invisible hand, or there's no government invention.
Yeah.
You know, right? Like
Yes.
I'm sure you know, but I kind of see it is in life implication too. Like I think that I don't necessarily tell people like it's time for, like you said, I don't necessarily recommend that idea, like a romance of like, you know, being an entrepreneur itself is not like something I want to, you know, push as a message. But basically I don't want to protect people from being hurt. Like that's gonna make them stronger, as we talked earlier. So if they want to jump in and try being entrepreneur, and like if they want to work on it, I think they should by all means should do it, even if it's a little chance. And then if they fail, that's okay. Like you should fail and you should get hurt, and you shouldn't protect yourself from being hurt. That's what I feel. That's what I feel like. And with this like ease of mindset, like you said, like I feel like right now I'm a lot more easier, like to jump around and being able to pivot my directions, and also it creates me patient. Like
I agree.
Yeah.
And you see the Sayed's on here.
Yeah.
And he said, when people work for a selfish motive, social good happens. And that's another, that's also an economic sort of like philosophy of the invisible hand, I think. And I want to tell you like what another thing that happens after that, you know, when you, like there's another thing that happens to me sort of spiritually or whatever, whenever at some point as I start to lose my faith in things. Like I used to have this big faith in psychology or in ethics or, you know, not that you don't want to be an unethical person, but I've never met a theory about people, behaviors, or business that is right 100% of the time. At certain points, you're in a strange place. Sometimes you have to drop whatever you actually believe. And then you find out that there's other ways to work. It's the most bizarre thing that ever happened. But if you step outside your door, you find the world is a much bigger place than you think. I love that. I love that, you know, sometimes people are really organized. They're much more efficient. But sometimes being organized just creates this huge burden. And the best thing to do is just drop your calendar. I can't explain it, but there's no single way to live. And that's like what I said it before, but it's like the most amazing thing about business and being on your own. That you just sort of find that you can listen to a motivational speaker, an economist, or a behavioral economist, or whatever you want, but at some point it's not going to be helpful.
Right.
You got to learn something else.
Yeah, it's not dimension.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I used to love philosophy, but I discovered that the philosophers, they discovered that same thing. They discovered like there's no philosophy. There's no single philosophy that works. Just like it's everything. And I'm you know, that's like paraphrasing 20th century philosophy. But it's true in the most bizarre way. You have to experience it. You can't theorize it. You
Right.
just have to sort of realize everything falls apart, you know? And I love it. It's one of the things that I like to help people through, actually, because they all find it. Within months, they find it's true.
So I think that was my last question, but before I let you go, I guess I'm gonna have two more questions.
Oh, sure.
The first one is, what's your advice for people who can't last their motivation long enough? Like, what do you think creates resilience in you personally? I guess you can talk about your personal experience.
Yeah, I'm going to start sounding like a really old man. I'm going to say hard work. You know, I mean, like, it's like the kind of thing your parents told you, like, hard work. That's it. Hard work, you know, and I'm like, yeah, but if you work on something for just a little while and you give up, you really don't learn something. And so you have to find something that you're willing to work on for a long time. Like for a lot of kids, it's band. You're like, you learn to play a musical instrument and your parents make you practice for 3, 4, 5, in Japan, maybe 10 years. And, you know, I mean, at first, but you do learn something just by repeating that effort, painting fences, building furniture, whatever it is. I think those programming computers, all these things, writing a book, right? All these things, if you only have very shallow experiences, you'll never know the lesson of persistence, you know? And so, but I think it can be very, very small amount of effort every day. But if you do that every day for even 2 or 3 months, you just be amazed at how much better you are. And I think it's important. I don't care what it is, but learn to do something well and work on it for years. And then you'll have something that you're connected to that you can use. You know, it's a tool. I don't know. I think that's the best. I think it's my favorite thing.
I see.
I gotta say, I did not understand what I was doing in biology. In PhD, I was doing this PhD. I was a little robot, you know. And it was my idea. My parents didn't make me do it, but I kind of just like, I want to go learn biology, and I would learn chemistry and all these things. And I would put these together, and I'd say, what does this all mean? I had no freaking idea. But I just kept going. So like, there's got to be something in here somewhere. That's literally how I got started, and it only took me 10 years.
I see. No, I definitely see that. I guess we need to be able to see more macro like purpose.
I don't know. Maybe that's just being stubborn. You know, I mean, I didn't know what I was going to get out. There wasn't anything I really wanted to do with it. I thought I'll just find something. Other people are much better at that. But you know, sometimes if you don't have an idea, like being stubborn, you know, that works too.
Interesting. So, Ron, before I let you go, I definitely want to know where people can find you. What's your social media, like everything? Can you tell me?
So my name is on LinkedIn, and you can contact me there. And I love to hear from entrepreneurs, and I'll give you a few minutes to talk about your idea, unless if you have a reasonable intro. And then I'm on TikTok. My handle is Startup Minute there, and I'm giving out my tips there. And those are the 2 best places. I'll have a website, and I have an Instagram here, and I have a website someday.
Is it coming out soon, or?
I'm gonna get that TikTok going. I've only got like 2 or 3 videos now. I'm going on a campaign now, so there'll be like 10 lessons or so up there real soon.